Thank you. I think before I talk about potential fields, what we have a problem with is technology adoption. And there are cycles of adoption in everything. And what I'm going to be talking about, it's not particularly new technology. It's been around for 20 years. Some of these methods have been around since 1950s in terms of the original research and publication of the ideas. And maybe not everyone is going to want to drive or be driven by an automated machine in the future. So there might be a rebellion. And so rather than talking about renaming Finding Petroleum, Finding Clean Gas just yet, maybe we should reassess that some things are never adopted. So when you set the expectation that there will be adoption, but as you will see in this presentation, I don't think, especially on our small island here, we have entirely adopted the technology to apply potential fields in a sensible way. And when I approached David Bamford one month ago, and I said, okay, so you're talking about which way is seismic going to go? What about potential fields? Are we forgetting about that? I think we need to talk about gravity and magnetic methods, because it's one of the oldest methods in the industry, and it still has value and use. And I'm going to show you something that I've already presented a couple of times. So I'm going to show you the whole thing, because we're here to talk about geophysics. And I'm just going to show you an interpretation which I think is right. And we'll wait and see. So I'm just going to talk about the geophysics first of all. And then we will go on a safari, if you like, of onshore and offshore East Africa. And then we will make a conclusion. And then I want to show you two other examples where we're getting these structures. And maybe we've never known we've had those structures, but I think they exist. And it's up to you to decide. But I hope that one day I will provide enough evidence that they really do exist by using the methods of integrating the geoscientific data that we've just been talking about in a sensible way. So the data description, we're talking about data that has come from the skies, from satellite data. And I presented this at the plate tectonics meeting last year, right here, with a bigger house of people. But I presented this, and there were no geophysical questions, so maybe I'll get some today. And so what we're looking at is quite a low-resolution magnetic data set. It's limited to 56 kilometers. And it's derived from a spherical harmonics model. So it's fitting the spherical harmonics model to observe data, terrestrial data, satellite data, aeromagnetic data. But it's only fitting it to 56 kilometers. And if you look at this 1D power spectrum, you can see that the EMAG2, which is so popular, and I haven't finished with EMAG2 yet, but you can see it's going up and down. It doesn't show good coherence at the shorter wavelength bandwidth. Whereas the EMM2 shows good coherence, but it only takes us down to 56 kilometers. But if we're looking at lower crustal-derived magnetizations, deeper crustal-derived magnetizations, maybe that is a useful way to see what structure is down there. And so we have just applied very simple processing to the satellite magnetics. It's not rocket science. It's standard processing. And the same, we have applied standard processing to the Sandwell free air gravity, which has been processed to what we call a decompensated residual. And all of this stuff can be found. I've put a few references down here. Recent textbooks will cover this. It's not new. When you combine shallow crustal density variations with deeper crustal magnetizations, it can tell you something very interesting. And I'm going to show you exactly what it does tell you about the structure in a regional sense, not a local sense, a regional sense. Because after all, what other data is going to be able to tell you from a regional sense in terms of the wavelengths that you are capturing in a survey about what is going on over thousands of square kilometres? Who is going to pay that money these days for a survey? And that's exactly the problem we have in the Western Indian Ocean. We're relying on sparse ship track data. But before we get on to that, every time I make this presentation, I say the same thing. Free air gravity correlates with topo-bathymetric relief. I think it's quite plain to see that. It doesn't correlate with geology or shallow crustal density variation. Okay? And it's most useful in geodesy. If you want to create a local geoid for an area, which maybe is an island archipelago. Very, very useful. That's the primary use of free air gravity. So when we process it carefully, I'm not saying that I can process this data any better than anyone else. I'm saying that due to a lack of adoption of the technology, you are not processing it correctly, or if you cannot derive these results, then the free air gravity is not going to tell you what you need to know about the sediments which we're interested in basin exploration. So from that aspect, that's where let the data speak for itself, not free air data, free air gravity data. And yes, onshore, obviously there is a problem with Sandwell, but the EGM 2008 is not very well understood. You can't just say all continents are poor quality because they rely on infill data or they're something fairly wishy-washy. If you read Paplas's paper, then you will be able to find out exactly where in the world the Sandwell is not very good. And 7 years ago, 7 years ago, I identified this area in the Lotokipi Plains, where obviously between the airborne and the EGM model comprising the Sandwell model at that time, there is an issue with interpolation. So you can't use it. There's no point trying to make sense of it. It's just infill. It's a worse type of gravity data onshore. Okay, let's talk about the SatMag onshore. Highly correlative. We're comparing the EMAG2 version 3 on the left with what I'm using as part of this presentation, the EMM 2015, before the EMAG2 version 3 was added in 2017, versus the second version of the World Digital Magnetic Anomaly Map. And you can see that in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got the Cabora Bassa trough. And we can see the same structures of the reworked near-Proterozoic crust. So we should have confidence in that. That's 3 data sets. How many more data sets do you need? Now let's look at the EMAG2 offshore. And you can see that it's probably one of the worst areas in the world for the scarcity of ship track data. And this is why the Western Indian Ocean is so poorly understood, because there just isn't the coverage there. Now, bear in mind, EMAG2 is presented at 2 arc-minute resolution. That's 4 kilometers. And you can see that some of these ship tracks are more than hundreds, over 100 kilometers apart. So when you are kriging and interpolating, what are you interpolating? Surely there must be a very high noise in this high-frequency bandwidth that you are looking at. So not a good signal-to-noise ratio. Onshore, it's different because there's lots of released aeromagnetic data to help constrain it. And that's exactly why it looks so good onshore. But you go offshore, big problems. And here we're comparing what I have, the EMM and the EMAG2. And when we go offshore, it's just literally a sea of anomalies. There's no coherency, no correlations that you can make. So I've just zoomed in here a little bit more, and you can see clearly on the left-hand side, onshore, you can see, stick with me to bend around and show you that you can see there, when you go offshore, just the noise that you're getting. Whereas here, we can identify particular fabrics which may resemble something more important. And this is a paper that I wrote with Nick Cameron, and it's just basically saying that, again, the EMM, when you've got this going on, where there's no data, the lower wavelength EMM field actually helps you. It's a spherical harmonics model based on measurements. It's not just fictionalized interpolation. And a lot of the problems with the satellite data sets is just a lack of understanding as to what comprises them. So this is fabric. We can see in the magnetics on the left and the residual gravity on the right that there's something there. There could be something there. And it's actually structure. It's structure that we can correlate to structural geology. Because we know that some people have done some seismic interpretation here, or we have a regional seismic section there, and it shows this type of structure. So it follows that we can start showing a little bit more confidence in what these structures actually relate to. And if you can do it with 2 other entirely independent data sets, then that will increase your confidence. So here we have the EMAG2 and the DTU. And given everything that I've said about EMAG2, the interpolation issues, and the kriging and the lack of coverage to justify 4-kilometer cell resolution offshore, you can see that it does show some sort of fabric which is telling us about the same type of structure. And the same with the DTU-13 gravity. Okay, so now we've got over the geophysics, and I'm going to show you some of the interpretation. I just also want to mention the East African Oil Group, who was founded by Chris Hatchett-Downs, geochemist, traditional geochemist, and we've been going a couple of years. And working in a group, and Chris will be talking about this, I think it's in June, so I don't need to elaborate too much, but a lot of these questions can be answered when you integrate the sort of thing that I do with it's actually more than a century and a half, probably, of expertise. And that could actually be something quite valuable as an input. So part of this interpretation focus on this. Sometimes people say, well, they don't look that convincing. But when you put them into the context of the broader structure that is going on, it's indicative of duplexing. And when I appreciated that, and there is actually a lot more history to this. Last year, back in May, I met with Colin Breeze and astrogeographer from BG, and they were talking about the well-known transgressional structures in the BG gas fields offshore Tanzania. There's a thesis out there which was passed on to me last month, actually, the first time that I'd read it. And in 3D seismic, they've mapped out transgressional structures. So knowing this, you put it together, and it forms a framework for something which could actually be real. And I'm not going to take you too much into the interpretation because I appreciate that we're short on time. We're here to talk about geophysics. But the main thing here to take away is that we've got this, ANZA, I believe, is where we get the closure in the structure. And you've got this main fault coming down here, which separates very distinctly oceanic crust from deformed continental crust. And on to the right, we get into an extensional phase which has been obliquely rifted, and to the left, we get a lot of compressional deformation. And we're showing both the gravity and the magnetics on this page. And the important thing is, I love this paper by Storti. It's almost as if I was destined to prove his work, because he is so right with regards his, if you just read the abstract, it's sufficient. His comments on how they control divergent tectonics or divergent margins, and how they control convergent margins. It's amazing stuff. And there's a paper there by Fritz, which no one in this room or in the oil industry probably even bothers reading, because it's talking about deep basin and the types of crust which date back to near-Proterozoic times, where in terms of people trying to find hydrocarbons, you're only going to be interested in the soft sediments. So maybe that's pretty much unfair, but he writes a good paper, and he defines the axis of a suture zone related to the East African origin, which coincides. This lack of outcrop here is where ANZA is. It's right there. And this one's a new one. I haven't shown this one before. This is seismic from Kaiser to Central ANZA, and we've got 3 lines down here. And Morley describes in his book a highly rotated Cretaceous lower section and a less rotated Paleogene upper section. And that fits very well into the context of where we're getting those steep faults correlating with these faults running through here. So there's a sense of rotation. It was said in 1999. It's just a matter of putting it together. And this one's a good one. I haven't just traced the lines on this. These are the faults taken from the GravMag, and we've taken Fritz's image, and we've taken this image of the geology of Kenya, and we've georeferenced it. So it's not just a sketch to say, oh, it could be a bit like this. This is the way that it is. Look, we have Mozambique belt, which is showing dextral offset. And we've got Miocene, we've got this fault ripping through Miocene-Pliocene volcanics. more. We have this one here. The Aswar shear zone could actually be a synthetic Riedel shear, which has formed on the margin of this fault. And if we fit, this is a really bad thing to do with gravity data, cut it out and then put it somewhere else. But all I'm trying to say here is that when you fit it up tight to the onshore Lamu Basin, as the paleomagnetic reconstruction people like to do, you can see that, okay, this is sometime pre-breakup, pre-Jurassic, but look where we've got the fault here. There has to be a lot of extension that occurs before the breakup and when you finally get the southerly drift of Madagascar to the south. There has to be an incredible amount of extension. It's just qualitative interpretation. This is an interesting area. Should get a little bit of oil interest, I guess, because we know that there are oil seeps and there are some interesting wells here. So we know that there's oil up there. And what we have is a primary and secondary phase stages of deformation. So, my attention was put towards a recent paper that was written just this year by Christensen in offshore northern Norway as to how you can get compressional and extensional structures forming at the same time because they can see it in their seismic data set. Well, this is how it forms by strike slip tectonics. That's the magnetics. And this one I've shown before, it's a line from Songa Island going all the way offshore into oceanic crust. And you can make very clear correlations of the transpersonal faulting pervasive through the shallow into the deeper section, which is through here. And then we have this, what looks to be like a failed rifting, triple junction failed rifting. And it sits right on the margin of the magnetic high signature. And where we have the continent oceanic boundary is right here, 5. And then later reactivation, you're getting movement along here, which is a fault that runs up to the north. And all this out here that happened after the oceanic crust had cooled is what is actually the Davy fracture zone. The Davy fracture zone, I believe, is just reactivated, fractured oceanic crust. It doesn't actually correspond to the path that Madagascar took as it drifted south, because the oceanic crust is being formed at that time. How can you create brittle fractures in rapidly cooling oceanic crust? So rapidly? No. Okay, just to break it up, I mean, if anybody wants to shout out the name of this field, please feel free. Anyone? It's a Gawa field. Here's Bahrain, and as we know, it's one of the largest oil fields. And this is the sea gap fault trend with all of the gas fields. So this is the best thing about East Africa, gas fields. But if we have a clean gas future, and it would be finding clean gas, and that's great, isn't it? We don't need to go for any Gawa. But if I'm not trying to relate Gawa to the sea gap fault trend here. You'll see why in a second. And as we go further south, there is a transition from the duplex into this transtension, and the Angosh appears to be a pull-apart basin that has formed on the margin of the strike slip corridor. And then, as we go further south, we come into this great big structure in here, which is the Davy Ridge. And the Davy Ridge is certainly a lot longer than the nearly 300-kilometre length of the Gawa anticline. I'm not saying they're the same petroleum system, of course they're not, but maybe there is some mega structure here that is not really being defined correctly, but could host something big. Where is the oil hiding? This is just to show you that offshore, there's no offshore East African rifting occurring. It's all locked in the duplexing zone. And when we look at the seismicity, on the poster outside I have iris data as well. So this is from Mullerbo, and you can see very clearly how the seismicity is locked along these faults. And here's a couple of TGS lines that I've borrowed from previous presentations. And we can see how the Davy Ridge, and it carries on further south until you get to a volcanic center. And you can see that this thing is actually plunging. You can see the strike of it. And as it plunges up towards the transition into the duplexing zone. And for the onshore Karoo, so here is the Luanga. This is how it's mapped on the CGMW map. Here is the Lake Malawi EARS trend, and here it is on the map. Carbora Bassa, Rafanza, and outcropping coal in the Mertese. So I don't think there's a problem here using onshore EGM, because as I say, the data is tied, the spherical harmonics model is tied to real measurements. So it works. So that is why we get such brilliant correlations. I don't know how the mapping was performed here. Maybe they took this from the gravity. I don't know. So this is a summary, and just to show you that the Davy fracture zone is out here. There's no fracturing going on here. We have these very specific, well-developed structures, so typical. And so where else can we find these? Well, we'll get on to that in a minute. But those are some quick conclusions that I wanted to make. So then I took this into North, Central, and South America. It's a work in progress, but I think we've got the same things going on. It explains, so I'm getting these very large-scale sigmoidal strike-slip tectonic controls on the evolution of the Caribbean plate. It's there. This is work to be developed, early stages. The UK continental shelf. Who would have thought that we have something like this out west of Rockall Trough? But it has to be there because it's showing the same structures as I've just taken you through in East Africa. Again, it's a work in progress. I don't necessarily want to do this work myself. I had enough mapping these structures, but it can be taken. Someone else can do it. It could be. It's probably best done in a university with someone to look at this. But look at this trend. This is Northern North Sea and the field trend. I haven't put any directions on the faults here. And lastly, what we have is what was acquired in 2015. This is what I'm talking about, the adoption, the time from going from someone who likes to play with the fast, new, high-tech stuff, and then when it's actually adopted by everyone. And, okay, someone had been released 1 year, but if we were all early adopters, then maybe someone would have said, well, hang on a minute, we don't need this survey. Don't bother getting it, because we can already see it in the Samwell gravity. It's as simple as that. I think that's it. I'll leave it there for questions.
Anyway, go back to your conclusion slide, because you flipped over that fairly.
Well, I think it.
There we go.
spoke for itself.
Yeah. Okay, anybody got any questions, please? Duncan, yeah.
Hi, Duncan Irving, Terra Data.
Yes.
I haven't looked at this for 25 years. It's brilliant. Thank you. Are you aware that there was an IODP cruise to the Davy Ridge in 2016? So you have a borehole on your transpressional vault now.
Yes, I was aware of the research that Yanis Bastos has done on the core log, taken all the way into the Mozambique Channel, and the conclusions that he has made. And in terms of the dating, it seems to fit with a southerly drift of material. The compositions of the core log that were found tie in with a more northerly origin. So these sediments have been transported south and obviously reworked, deformed. So,
is there anything from the rock physics world that you can tie to what you're seeing in the potential field?
Look, I mean, the people that I mentioned in this East Africa oil group that we have formed have, as I say, over 150 years of experience. Most of that comes from two very senior guys, and one has done a lot of very rigid well correlations, very strict correlations on the fasces changes that are required, and this has all been published research as well. So, of course, there has been a lot of discussion and non-acceptance of the structures. The structure I am working on in East Africa alone is not a finished product. We know with interpretation, you never tick. Well, you may do for budgetary requirements, but it's never really finished. But we're refining the structure, and of course there are still issues with it. This work should have been published in the Petroleum Geoscience, but I didn't have enough time to write it properly. But it will be done. But I think in terms of the other observations that you're trying to get at, yes, we've looked at a lot of seismic, a lot. Some you can't talk about, some you can. We've looked at the well correlations. Of course, there's always disagreement, but it's refining it and making revisions. A few weeks ago, I received Duncan McGregor's extensive fault compilations data set, and you will be amazed at the correlations that there are with that, with the development and propagation of the margin and the southerly drift of Madagascar. And I hope to show you some of that at the AAPG, actually, it's next month. So I'll be there putting some timing on it. Because, yeah, structure is one thing, but it has to make sense in terms of how it relates to what we need to know to build and de-risk the projects that we're working on. So, yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, let's take a coffee break.